I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Rutland City Board of School Commissioners to order. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the Secretary please note that all commissioners are present with the exception of Commissioners Sherman and Wilkinson. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes of the last regular meeting of the board dated February 13th, 1996. A motion, please.
Move to accept.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of February 13th?
I'd like to make a correction. I don't know where it is exactly, but I was given credit for seconding a motion and I wasn't here. But somewhere on the minutes.
That's hard to do.
Right on the first page.
First page.
Motion by Marianne McCall.
First page.
That's right, under motion minutes. Does anybody recollect who was the second last week? It was you, Terry, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was you, Terry.
No, you made the motion.
You made the motion. I think I did.
Okay, Sam Warren was the second.
Is that because we look alike?
Yeah, I think it was. We both spoke for us.
Okay. Are there any other additions or corrections to the minutes of February 13th? If not, all in favor of the minutes as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Written communications to the board. Debbie.
Yes, I have two. First one is from Barry Ferraro. Dear Dr. Dick, I am writing this letter to express my concern about the actions of Cheryl Burgoyne, one of our elected school commissioners. It is my belief that as an elected official that an individual is responsible to the group or organization that he or she is elected to represent. That responsibility weighs precedence over a person's own political or religious beliefs and should be the motivating force when making decisions affecting the school. I don't believe that Ms. Burgoyne has taken her elected role into consideration when she petitioned Dr. Brothers to stop all activity in the schools pertaining to the education of the populace of our city in regard to the mayor's voucher proposal. Another issue that perplexes me is how Cheryl has made this voucher issue a political issue. Since the mayor issued this proposal, I have taken the issue to be a threat to public education and a terrible burden to our already heavily taxed citizens. It is my opinion that this is a school issue and not a political issue. You are aware that the district has tried to keep our educational costs from increasing for many reasons, the most important being not to exceed the $1.25 charter limit. If the mayor's proposal passes, the implications to the school system could be extreme. One ramification of this proposal will be that taxes must be raised to pay for both vouchers and to offset any differences to the way the state will fund public education. Bottom line, the more money spent, the more taxes that will have to be raised. There is no golden goose to take the burden off the taxpayer's shoulders. Tax revenues can and will take the form of rooms and meals taxes, income taxes, sales taxes, and the dreaded property tax. There is no simple solution, as taxes are the only way that education is funded. We hurt ourselves if we think we can afford to lose one penny from our public schools that are already stretched to meet the needs of all students. I would like to point out that our committee, Voters Exposing Vouchers, has not used school time to conduct business. All of our meetings have been held after school hours. It is true that the group ran off a number of informational notices using school paper, but restitution to the school has been made in full. It has been a very uncomfortable position that our group has been in. Contrary to public opinion, we are acting in a role that is solely educational. It is the desire of our group to get the other side of the picture out, so that the electorate can then make an educated choice when it's time to vote. We hope that with the facts we will influence choice, but at no time have we asked people to vote other than what their conscience dictates. After all, our roles as educators is to give information. What people do with that information is their choice. My last concern to be addressed is the false notion of national involvement of the NEA. This is a local issue paid for by local funds and nothing more. To date, the only expenses incurred by our group was for one ream of paper. This is hardly a concerted national effort with an influx of big bucks. I hope that after this issue has been put to bed with people voting yea or nay, we can continue to operate our quality schools with all doing the job that they have been hired for or elected to do. Sincerely, Barry Ferraro. And the next one's to Dr. Dick. Barry Ferraro, dear Dr. Dick, Barry Ferraro, a teacher at the Stafford Technical Center, is organizing opposition to the School Children's First Scholarship Proposal, Rutland City Ballot Item Number 1. It has come to our attention that Mr. Ferraro either has used or intends to use school facilities and equipment to advance his political agenda. Although we do not oppose a healthy debate on this important topic, we are surprised that taxpayer-funded resources are proposed to be used to promote opposition to this ballot item. We are sure that you are aware of the policy dated 1988, number 6310 and 3250, which are attached, that specifically prohibits the use of school district properties for such purposes. We also noticed that Mr. Ferraro, in his letter to staff members, which is also attached, referenced certain lists that will be used for a phone campaign. We are assuming that these are publicly available lists of registered voters. If, however, the lists are of parents of public school children and information is to be sent home with school children, we believe the activity also violates policy dated 1988-3320, which is also attached. If it's determined not to so violate, we respectfully ask that these lists will be made available to our group as well. The information that we have leads us to believe that Dr. Brothers is aware of these issues. We respectfully ask that you examine this situation and take appropriate action. Sincerely, Rutlanders for School Choice, Sean Brannon, Chairman. And enclosures are Barry Ferraro, to staff members, a letter from Barry Ferraro and the policies so noted in the letter. That's it.
I have a statement that I would like to read in my defense relative to the first letter. It causes me some concern that Mr. Ferraro or anyone else would conclude that because I support the School Children First Scholarship proposal, I do not then support public education. This could not be further from the truth. Perhaps my fellow commissioners can recall public events in which their mere presence was heralded by visible displays of admiration and endless gratitude, and I do certainly understand the intoxicating impact of that public adoration, but it's not for that reason that I serve on this board. I serve on the Rutland City Board of School Commissioners because I believe in the strength and the value of public education. And like my fellow commissioners, I believe I have something to contribute and I can make a difference. Nationally, there's a growing discontent with public education. Newspapers, magazines, presidential and local politics are filled with information and events to demonstrate this discontent. School choice, vouchers, magnet schools, privatization, charters, accountability, funding are solutions and thoughts heard throughout the country. That movement did not begin with Cheryl Burgoyne, and it's not likely to end with Cheryl Burgoyne. However, I am the commissioner that brings this perspective to the board, this table, and this district. It will serve no purpose to deny its existence by launching a political campaign against it, funded by those very precious taxpayers' dollars intended for the classroom. That approach would only serve to add fuel to the fire of discontent. I urge this board and this education community to try to learn more about this growing unrest and attempt to understand the root of what it is that we are hearing. In the past, the education community has been criticized for not getting the message out to the public. Getting the message out is only half of what it takes to communicate effectively. It's time for us to listen. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is an opportunity for any citizens in the audience who wish to address any issues to identify themselves, and please do so. Okay, if not, the next item on the agenda is the personnel memorandum. And at this time, the chair would entertain a motion that the licensed and non-licensed section of the personnel memorandum, number 126, dated February 23rd, 1996, be approved as recommended by the superintendent of schools.
Thank you, Dr. Dick. Let me proceed through with the recommendations tonight. First, under the license section, the name of a long-term substitute appointment, Jessica Welch, at the Rutland Intermediate School to replace a retired educator. Secondly, under the non-licensed, excuse me? Oh, Bill Foley.
Bill Foley. It's in your personnel.
I can't find it.
Secondly, under non-licensed appointments, the name of Joan Manning, paraeducator at the House Center, which is a replacement. Melissa Ayers at the Rutland Intermediate School, which is for a new child. Maurice LeClaire, a bus driver, is for the school district. This is, although it's a new position in terms of a bus driver, it's really using the monies that we were paying the supervisor, Franny Clark, with, and we feel that instead of replacing the supervisor, but with a bus driver, we'll get, in this case, more bang for our dollar because it's those type of people that we need to drive our vehicles. So that's the recommendation for Maurice. Resignations, Christine Martin as a girls JV softball coach, Jessica Welch, paraeducator at the middle school. Finally, the coaching appointment of Richard Alberti for the girls JV softball at the high school.
Are there any questions or comments regarding the personnel memorandum? If not, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Instructional development, Dr. Brothers.
Thank you again, Dr. Dick. Tonight we start to enter into a little bit more detail in our budget discussions, developing the budget for next school year, which will conclude near the last meeting at the end of May. And so we have 3 months in front of us, actually a little bit more than that. What I'd like to do tonight is, Bob, did you put that up there, please? What I want to start with tonight, just in sort of a brief way, give you an overview of where I see our income and our expenses right now, and then move on and have a discussion about the primary portion of the school budget with the assistance of John Stempek out front. So first, John? Let me go through and just point out a few things. I showed you this list last time, 2 weeks ago. Filled in a few blanks right now, and I just want to mention some of those numbers to you and go over some of the other key ones. This, of course, is our key figure in regular state aid from the Department of Education, from the legislature. That's the same as it was last time, and all the checking we've done and contacting with the department, that's about as firm a figure as we can get right now, a $3.2 million piece. And that's the same as it was last time. All these figures are the same. This one we've increased slightly because we have neglected to count in the 5 tuition students that are attending our middle school. So we've upped that number from 215 to 220, which has increased this by some $30,000. Figures that we did not have in here last time, we've come to some grips with, and they are the figures representing special education reimbursement, intensive, extraordinary, and the state block grant. These are what I would consider to be low-ball estimates based upon the State Department's printouts and based upon a new way of distributing special education money this year. We have hopes that we'll see increases in this money, but for the time being, we wanted to list them in the manner shown. We've also increased this figure somewhat because we have some new IEP Medicaid revenue we're anticipating next year. So we've plugged about an additional $40,000 into the state federal grant line item. And that would bring together tonight my projection at this time that our current receipts would total about $9.4 million. Our original budget I presented to you last time was 18.9, and that figure stays the same so far at this point. Okay, let me switch from that to another summary, which I want to point out where I see us and some pencil sharpening that we've done to try to zero in on a problem. And the problem is what I mentioned to you last time, that we have probably $800,000 to $900,000 that we've got to close to get this thing down near a figure that I figure the school district can afford for next year. So let me go through some of the steps. This is sort of a summary of where I see us right now. Again, it's very early in the process. There's the 18.9 million budget figure. This is the total receipts I just showed you from the other page, which leaves about this much money to raise, or somehow to account for, or to reduce. Our present taxes are $8,415,000. I would anticipate at this time that I would be recommending to you a small additional increase of some $228,000, which would leave room over, plenty of room over for you to work on a budget for the following year, which would be the fifth year in that whole process. But this would bring us to an estimated total of $8.6 million, still leaving us with this gap here, that $900,000. Let me walk you through where some of this can come from, not all of it, but where I can see some of that coming from right now. If this was the end of May, and we had to finally, find places to make up some funds, and we're not at the end of May right now, I would look at these types of items. I would have to take our supplies and equipment and probably reduce it by quite a bit, and by about this much, and operate on the same level we're operating right now. We would make some adjustment in the Stafford Technical Center tuition figures. We would not add any of the new kinds of positions, one of which we'll be talking about tonight. We wouldn't add any of those. We found by checking our amount we put in for our police coverage that we're probably $7,000 too high, so we can take some money out there. There are places in our benefit program that, when Bob and I reviewed these carefully the past 2 weeks, we really sharpened our pencils and found that we could reduce by these amounts of funds. And these are pretty solid. And I'm also then anticipating that special ed aid is going to bounce upwards, and that our unexpended income is probably going to go up from where it is right now. And you'll see something about that in your contingency report later tonight. So I'd say we're covering about $686,000 right here this evening on this gap, and this leaves about $215,000 to go. Well, that's still a sizable amount of money, but at least I think it's something that we're within striking distance of in terms of balancing the budget. And we keep looking at it and keep sharpening our pencils and looking at places we can cut and change ways of doing business to try to get this thing into line for next year. I just wanted to present you with sort of an overview of where I see things this evening at this point in our whole budget process. And you're welcome to questions, or we'll move on. Bill?
I don't really have a question about the information you have up here, but the police coverage item leads me to recall a meeting at the Board of Aldermen Committee meeting, in that we had been notified that we would be responsible for picking up the cost of crossing guards this next year. Is that included in the budget?
It was discussed last year, but we've never been officially notified about that.
Okay.
That had to do with changes in positions and stuff like that at City Hall.
Right.
But I have not heard, I'm not aware that we've heard anything to lead us to believe differently at this point in the process. But that's a valid concern, but last question,
I
nothing's
guess I
happened with it.
thought that I had understood that was supposed to be our official notification, but that certainly...
It was more of an official notification that it's
That it
something
will
they're
be
probably going to consider if certain people retired and stuff like that.
Okay,
That's about $25,000-$30,000.
right. That was the number that she had, Sharon Davis
Yes.
had launched out there. That-
Have you had any
That was a
indication
yes.
from them that,
No,
no, you haven't talked about that?
it was just that line item about police coverage that made me think of it, that's all.
So, Madeline?
I know I wasn't at the last meeting, but is there something in here that lists what those new positions are?
No, we hadn't presented you with any single list of what they are. If
So you're gonna propose that we cut them before we even know what they are?
I'm proposing, what I want to share with you is that we have a difficult budget process. What I'm also telling you is that I did what many members of the board asked me to do, was to take the reins off the school district and let people advise me of everything they wanted in the budget for this year. And we've done that. But that still puts us in a position where we've got to reduce some things somewhere, or find other sources, or do something differently, and do a whole combination of things to get our budget in line.
Well, I'm glad we're doing that, but
I said that last week, or 2 weeks ago.
the other things I can see how you can decide to do, but how you can cut the positions before we evaluate them. I would like to see, I'd like to kind of have that $92,000 back in there.
May I suggest to you that this is the superintendent talking, explaining where the position is tonight? That this is not the final budget, or this is not the final recommendation?
So as these things come up, will you tell us
Yeah.
that that's one of the positions that I would consider not funding?
Very clearly. Chuck?
Are you going to give us this at some point in time in a line item type outline?
Yes, we had distributed it last week. Your initial one is probably sitting out there for you, Chuck. And I'm going to pass out another set tonight also, which the board asked about 2 weeks ago. Are there any other?
On the Stafford Technical Center tuition, seeing we've already voted in what the cost per student is, are we figuring on sending less students over there?
Well, we had anticipated in our original budget a very generous number of Rutland High School kids going to the tech center with the accompanying tuition figure to support that. In our work right now, we backed that off about 15 kids because that still leaves us higher than where we are this year. So I think that's one we can appropriately maybe sustain. So we'll still be the number one person or school district in terms of the students in the tech center.
What point in time do we find out what kids are going to go to the Stafford Technical Center? Because we're changing, so now we're looking at a different group of kids. How soon do we find that out?
Go into spring and then go through the registration process.
When do the sending schools have to let you know, their number?
For the technical school? Well, there's 2 dates next school year that are used as the billing dates. Bob, do you recall what those dates were?
Well,
It was a change in
I
the
know
legislation.
March 15th this year as well.
As well.
I think the other was maybe October.
It's in the fall
October,
sometime.
sometime in October 15th. somewhere in there.
Well, Madeline, let me also reassure you that in the tech center, in vocational education now in the state of Vermont, if in terms of a whole school district like ours, the operating school district, if at a point we find that there aren't, or certain school districts didn't send enough students in to make the full enrollment that the budget was based upon, then we have the power to go back and rebuild everyone to increase the tuition rate for students.
I understand that. I just wondered, with the changes, were we asking the sending schools to give us a date? Just so, understanding, of course, that students can change, and now that they've had time to visit the technical center and mull over with their peers the implications of not being in school for their senior year, are we asking them to give us some kind of firm figure? Or not firm, but one...
I can't give you the answer to that.
Okay.
I can get the answer for you. I don't see Sharon sitting here tonight, so I can't answer.
Okay. I think that's something we should have. That we should ask this as a courtesy.
The parking fee. Okay, if there's no further question here, let's move into the primary part of our budget. So John, I think I'll ask you to come up here, maybe sit in the other John's seat.
Of course. I saw it.
Well, you want that?
I think you can still see it, even with the lights on.
Do we have a copy of this that we can follow as you go through this?
I didn't make them, John, I can't. That's something easy enough to do. All I wanted to do was to give you just a staffing chart of the Northeast School and then another one of the Northwest School, so you had a real visual perception of the cluster arrangements in these schools and how they're organized this year. I know you've heard about it, I'm sure you're familiar, maybe you even visited the building and see how they operate. But each school is operated around a cluster A and a cluster B. And a cluster contains one kindergarten teacher, two classes there, but there's one position. In first grade, there are two teachers and two classes. In second grade, there's two teachers and two classes. And then this is a multi-age class, which works in this cluster. Then the other cluster has the same configuration in the school. Then there's one part-time kindergarten, and those kids, when they move to first grade next year, half of those kids will go this way to cluster A, and half of the kids will come over here to cluster B. So there's 13 teachers. The 13th teacher right now is part-time, but under the plan that the principals have talked about, they'd like to see that person become full-time. And John will talk about that in a few minutes. Now, in addition to the regular classroom teachers, these are the other support personnel which help operate that school building. Support teachers are three. Those are what we used to call the learning center teachers, or the special educators, and or the title or chapter teacher. The three of those people that work in that building. One speech person, speech and language. On the school coordinator, which is a person that we took on about midway through this year. She works half in this building and half in the other primary school. One nurse, part-time art, half music, half physical education, one library aide, and then in Northeast there are 10 paraprofessionals and 10 aides that work in the building. That's the staffing of the Northeast School. And the numbers that I'll show you in the budget soon will support this staffing arrangement. This is what I was referring to.
There's two of those. One is called the homeschool coordinator, and the other is the school-based clinician.
Okay, and that's my error, John. This is the person who we've had there all year. And it's a school-based clinician that came on halfway through the year. That's the person I missed here.
Is that a .5 or a full-time?
It's .5 in each building. Sure.
So the homeschool piece should actually be a 1 then? I mean, we're talking that.
Or yes.
Okay. And both the homeschool coordinator and the school-based clinician, are they paying on the teacher's salary?
I don't think the school-based clinician.
Okay. Okay.
All right, the other school, the Northwest School, which is John's building. essentially organized the same way. I didn't mention before, but I'm sure everyone understood that these are the number of kids we're talking about in the classes. So you have cluster A, cluster B, part-time kindergarten person, 13 teachers. And then the same kind of support staff with the addition of another .5 person here. And then in John's building, there's 11.5 paraprofessionals right now this year. This is the figure that can change, depending upon the student body. The last one.
And is that other positions still there too?
Yes. I can make copies of this very easily for everyone. Send them out or
Does that balance off at kind of one paraeducator per teacher? You know, that's not the way it's planned out, is that the way it works out in the classrooms?
Pretty close to that.
They have multiple paraeducators.
we definitely tried to plan it out so there's one in each kindergarten room. Right? I was looking at our one kindergarten teacher out there.
They don't all have full-time paraeducators, but classrooms where there are students who have a definite need for a one-on-one person, have that person all day, and then other paraeducators may come into that classroom for portions of the day and help out. So I don't know that there's any that have two all day long.
Just perhaps to refresh your memory, this is the program that last year we hired the additional primary school teacher out at Northeast schools, so we could actually set up the same sort of system in each building. Northeast was in one teacher short, and we would not have made the same nice kind of arrangement.
And these are next year's figures.
These are this year's figures, but they're very similar to what next year's figures will be.
Do you have the total student population for these two buildings?
I can tell you they're 290, give or take a few in each building. I think Northeast has a few more.
We looked on those projection sheet I passed out a couple weeks ago. You see that number?
Okay.
The total number is cut in half, practically equal, John, pretty much.
So our neighborhoods are holding up okay as far as keeping even numbers?
Yes, yeah. Within maybe 5 or 10 kids in the 300 or so that are in each building. But don't forget when you ask that question, that's a question that came up a couple of weeks, 2 weeks ago, that Bill asked to get some verification about. Oh, Bruce Gee was talking about the number of students in that of Rutland High School. Same thing happens here on a prorated basis, of course, but what happens here is even more motion or movement around the city, where youngsters will go from one side of the city to the other. And some of those cases, if not all, we try to keep the kids in the same building if possible for the rest of that year. Keep their life in the same rather than switch buildings. However, there we have to ask the parents to somehow try to make a transportation arrangement. The busing system is pretty much locked into place once we start in September.
When I look at each Northeast and Northwest, I see numbers that look like 5 potential first grade next year. Are we planning to expand multi-age so we can pick up these, balance things off?
I'm not sure how multi would work. We have the equivalent of 5 first grades in each building. It's just that for our full-time first grades, and the other two halves in the current multi. So currently we have
to wash right in the same way. Thank you.
Sure.
How many classrooms do we have at each Northwest and Northeast school? Do we have extra classrooms, or are we
They're filled.
filled? Are they filled with classes, or are they filled with some of the special functions like music and art?
No, for the most part, they're filled with classes.
Don't we have a music and an art room?
No?
We don't? They're still going from room to room?
No.
Well, we've made arrangements for them to use the multipurpose room when the phys ed teacher is not there. We switch their schedule so that, well, the first half of the week, the art and music people are in the gym. In the second half, the phys ed people are in, and we switch with Northeast. But they don't have an art room or music room.
With all this reorganization, with millions of dollars spent, we don't have one room in each primary school. Wasn't that a goal?
It was in the intermediate school when that was reconfigured, but not in the primary school.
Well, it ought to be a goal.
If we had kept the other school, the small school building online, we could have worked that out that way. But in the end, we decided for a lot of different reasons not to keep that one online. And then we switched into the present arrangement.
Well, I apologize for my ignorance. Had I known that, I would have been nagging you up. David. I'll be nagging you.
So?
I guess this is probably more of an observation than a question. But when you look at the numbers of adults that we have working with around 300 students for each building, it would appear that we're talking about 30, 31, 32, 33 adults around, somewhere around in there. And, I mean, if you just use simple division, which is probably a very naive way to try to calculate the numbers out, one would then assume that we could actually have class sizes, one teacher to 10 students. And while I believe that that's an oversimplification of what the problem might be, it does lead me to wonder that whether or not we would be better off to begin looking at perhaps reducing some specialists in favor of reducing student-teacher ratios.
We wouldn't have a classroom to put them in.
Well, that's what I just heard.
But we'd also have
But
a
we
huge
do-
increase in salary, just to get rid of a paraeducator and replace it with a teacher.
Well, and I guess I'm not suggesting that we're talking about one-for-one, but would there be benefits of going to, say, classes of 15? Would that mean that maybe we wouldn't need as many paraeducators if we weren't dealing with as large classes?
Are we locked into paraeducators by law? Or we just...
in some cases are no longer.
Not by an IEP we are, if it requires a full-time service of a paraeducator. We try to write most of our IEPs to require access to a paraeducator, thus reduce that one-to-one relationship. But we honestly don't believe that all those youngsters need a full-time shadow all the time. And they have to learn to be by themselves some of the time to get along with one.
Are all of these paraeducators attached to a student?
Oh, I don't think so.
Well,
But here,
they are in an idea, how much money,
how we fund it.
but they do, offer some other and there are some students, that do need some of the one-on-one thing, but they're after that.
I thought, Jerry, did you say specialist? Did you mean like art and music?
I just mean all of the positions on the line.
Nurse, art, music.
Sure. Support teachers, speech language pathologists, librarians, paraeducators. I'm just suggesting that there are a lot of adults there that we're buying. And would it make more sense to look at our delivery of services and question whether what we're doing is the best for kids?
If you look at that a slightly different way, we approach some of those ratios that you talk about at certain critical times during the school day when we have support teachers go into classrooms and work with the teacher and with children in that classroom. And at the same time, sometimes there's a paraeducator in there that works under the direction of the teachers, so that we may at times have, maybe during a writing task or a math task or a reading task, 2 or 3 adults in the classroom that then effectively make our ratios 1 to 7, 1 to 8 for a short period of time. It's not for the full day. And then those people rotate throughout the building. But we try to make good use of them that way.
Well, isn't it oversimplification to suggest that we could eliminate 11 and a half paraeducators, take that same number of dollars, and by half the number of teachers and decrease class size? Because those paraeducators are attached to a kid by IEP, and if they weren't there, even in a class of 12 or 13 kids, if you had one of those IEP kids that needs a paraeducator that doesn't have one, the teacher couldn't teach the 10 or 11 kids that are in the classroom anyway. So I think that is an oversimplification, is it not?
It is an oversimplification, and Cheryl admitted that. We also have to need more classrooms and a system like that, more spaces. And that would bring in other costs, that would bring some of the building back online, for example, that we eliminated by closing the building down.
But we can't just let those we're locked in now with special education laws that have those paraeducators, whether we wanted to keep them or not.
But this is one part of our school budget, our school operation, that we're going to be taking a very good look at, a very deep look at. We do every year. Every year.
I guess I'd like to follow up a little bit on what Michael said. As I understood Ellen McGarry, we write IEPs in order to fund some of these paraeducators. Is that what you had said?
Well, I don't think it should be said that way. Those children need this assistance. We don't create it by writing an IEP for them. When they need it, through the IEP process, we provide it. But the
And then
need
you
has to be
strategically
there.
replace those
How
kids.
could you change an IEP if it was felt that the child no longer needed a one-on-one aid?
We
You
have
would
done
say-
that, when the child like needs is removed every year, and look at that and rewrite it. We have looked at that, and in some cases, we have eliminated
Okay.
some paraeducators out of the IEP.
Okay, so it is possible.
Need for that, so it is possible.
And the IEP is not limited, just that
Right.
section.
We're also audited on that whole system. Is it every year, Kelly?
Not every 4 years.
But every 4 years? Where they come down and go through your IEPs and look at your student records, and you have to make sure that you've got everything, all your T's crossed and your I's dotted, because if they find out that you're trying to work the system to your advantage over other school districts by writing up IEPs that aren't warranted, you really get your hands slapped and get penalized. So you have to be careful about that. And we try to be very careful about that. But we also try to get maximum use out of those people that are hired. Okay?
This would show up on our budget. These people aren't our employees, but aren't there indeed volunteers who also are?
Yes, there are. Yeah.
Indeed, there are more adults than beyond.
John, did you talk about
There
that?
are foster grandparent association volunteers, which their pay is like stipend, but they're in many of our primary classrooms. And the teachers also arrange to have parent volunteers come in to help them, so that they, again, at times, have a considerably better student-teacher or student-adult ratio, I should say, than what we have here.
More questions or observations?
I guess just,
We still have more to go here in this primary school business.
can I feel comfortable though, that even though we talked about maybe different ways to use adults, that we're not gonna be reorganizing in the next 6 weeks. And I don't want teachers out there feeling that one of the things we're going to be looking at now is a reduction. And from what I read, we've talked about not having any reductions.
Well, it won't be my recommendation. I could tell you that.
I haven't talked about any reductions yet, I haven't talked about any reorganization.
I know it,
yet.
but at the board table now, Cheryl's mentioned it, we talked about, you know, the number of adults in the classroom, and that always leads to the discussion of, well, a whole variety of things. And I just want to feel comfortable.
I'll try to be more careful about controlling my idea flow.
I try to do that, you know. In September, it's fine, I said this to you last year.
We don't get to have these
I know, well, you said that last year too.
I guess I would have to sort of say though, and I'm real sorry if this makes you uncomfortable, but that conceptually, I think there is a need to at least look at that idea. I have to say, as a teacher, I would wonder if my class size was reduced actually, not on paper, to 15 in my classroom. Not the little magic numbers, how many divided into how many. If there were 15 live bodies in front of me, I would have to assume that the need for additional adult support might be reduced. So I guess I need to sort of support Cheryl's concept, regardless of the discomfort it causes Madeline, in terms of that has lots of high appeal to me at this age level in the primary building, knowing what we know about what they need to learn. I'd want to watch very carefully how we did it and be sure that we were in fact reducing it in a
But we have no more
reality basis.
rooms, right? We have no more rooms, the only way to do that
Sure, we
is
got-
to reopen
We have a whole
South
building.
schools.
Yeah, we got no building.
Yeah, the whole
And
building.
make all of the decisions between now and then.
We've done it before, yeah.
Let it be said very loudly and clearly for the benefit of the listening audience. The superintendent is not in any way talking about opening up any new school or bringing any school back online again this year or next year. We've got to make do with what we have. We've got our budget line to operate next year.
Now, this is just the board wants to let you know that, you know, we said we were coming to this process with everything open, and we want to be hearing absolutely everything, and then we'll decide what we throw out.
And we hear from you to watch. We hear from you that you don't have any plans for going that
We can
direction.
stretch it
Okay.
out about 5 months worth, I could be like,
No. This board works on short notice, we just sort of,
Action. Just need action, tell you.
And I think realistically, knocking those numbers down 4 or 5 students wouldn't decrease significantly the need for more adults in the classroom, based on what children they were. You'd have to cut that at least in half to make me feel comfortable about reducing that amount. So, 17 to 15 wouldn't do much, nor would 20 to 15 in some cases.
Interesting.
I guess it would depend on the individuals. That's the frustrating part of this process, is that we don't have the flexibility of budgeting, I guess, a fund that would allow us to play with that in the middle of the year, either take from or give back to, at least at the building level. I mean, I know you do at the board level, but we try to project beginning in November for what we're going to have in September, and it's very, very difficult.
you have much more, maybe we'll wait till the end of it on.
Okay. Well, I thought it might be appropriate now, John, to maybe get into this kindergarten piece and just explain that a little bit, the type of thing that you folks have been talking about.
How little bit?
You want to be home by 10 o'clock.
Actually, I was looking for it now.
Well, if you think of this in a conceptual framework, with our goal to be to recognize the fact that as primary schools, we feel that we're one of the first areas to prevent student failure and promote student success in the public school. Not that there aren't educational opportunities for children before they come to the public schools and even in the early essential ed program, but with kindergarten and first and second grade, we're one of the first lines of offense. We feel that, and research bears us out, that if we can provide more and better activities for kids at this level, that perhaps down the road they'll have less failure and more success. One of the areas that our program has room for growth in is the taking children into kindergarten more than the half-day program of half-day 5 days per week that we have now. We would love to take all of them in 5 full days, but as we discussed earlier, we don't have the room for that. So we looked at what we could do, and what we could do is provide all of them 3 full days per week, with the addition of 1/2 kindergarten teacher in each building. So as a framework, if you think of students coming 5 half-days and increase that to 6 half-days, which we would then put together as 3 full days, and they would be there for lunch, and the continuity of an all-day program for 3 days, and not come to school at all for 2 days. That's an area that we would like to improve our program and provide that for children beginning next year. Exactly how we would do it is still up in the air because we have looked into several different ways in terms of how to do that. But the basic idea would be to have them come 3 full days and not at all but 2 days. Yes.
Why?
To increase the amount of time they're in school, to provide more in their kindergarten program.
To just have to increase the amount of time that they're in school, or is there some kind of a goal we hope to accomplish by increasing their amount of time?
Well, obviously, we would provide more good kindergarten programming for them, and we would hope that they...
Just more of the same of what we're doing.
No, not at all. I mean, if we had them there a whole day, that program would look different, very much different than it is now as a half day. By the time we get them in and get their coats off and their breakfast and get their coats back on to get on the bus and they have phys ed, you can imagine the continuity of a 2-hour, 45-minute program versus what we could do if we didn't have to put their coats on until 3:15. And we'd have to take a look at the whole thing, and a lot of it would stay the same, but we would add quality programming to it. We just wouldn't have them there for more time to do more of the same thing. No.
This is going to take me a minute. I'm going to try and go back here 13 years to some kindergarten arguments, and I realized there was different ages at the time. Why it was important that students have kindergarten in the morning and students have kindergarten in the afternoon, and that the afternoon was downtime for many children, that wasn't the best time for them to learn when that was their first experience with school. And so there was an advantage to having kids go half-time all year for one semester in the morning and then switch it around the other semester. So I have to think that if I think about those arguments, that for those students that are going all day, 3 days a week, that afternoon time, if I'm to believe what the kindergarten teachers told me, is not the best time for them to learn. And then if I think about the argument about why we made the age for entering kindergarten older, it seems to contradict your theory that students are ready in their first years of school to be there all day. And if I forget that, and I think about the fact that kids are going to be in school 3 days and home 4 days, I'm going to have to ask you to show me a lot of research that tells me that that's better for kids. I could support kindergarten 5 days a week, but I really, from a 5 whole days a week, from a practical point of view, as a teacher and as a mother, can't understand how it would be better for children to be home 4 days and in school 3 full days. And I can't, someone mentioned this last week, and I did try to find some research to support this, knowing this was going to come up. And I couldn't find anything I looked at in a cursory way, so I really would need to see a lot of research. And then to even make me consider it. Because otherwise, I can't believe what you told me these 2 other times.
Well, I hope in 13 years we've made some progress. I don't think all the same arguments that were valid 13 years ago are always the same currently. There have been some studies done that have shown that, for example, there's a concern by some people that kindergarten students that typically attend school in the morning, go home in the afternoon, take a nap, would have a difficult time. The studies have shown that that's true for a couple of weeks. And then they adjust to that, and that it's not a big factor in the rest of their school day for the rest of the year. So there are things like that that we would show you. We're not asking to make that decision tonight, so we don't have that information, but there are attitude changes and expectational changes and some actual, when I say research, observational type things and programs that have existed throughout this state and throughout the country that have shown that these things can work.
Well, also part of that argument was on the part of the teachers who at the time taught kindergarten, some of whom still teach kindergarten, who felt that they were at their best in the morning, and the afternoon was not their best teaching time. And that's why they liked the switch. So maybe they've changed in 13 years.
I hope so.
John, can I ask you exactly, what is the problem that you're trying to address and what you're trying to accomplish?
We're trying to address more opportunities for learning for kids at the kindergarten level and increasing the amount of time that they're in school. We know we can do that.
Now, why is it that you feel you have to have more opportunities for learning for kindergarten students? What is it that brought you to that conclusion?
We've read things that occur at other schools that say that kids make better gains if they're there longer in a good program, not just there longer, but in a good 5-day program is optimal. A less than 5-day, more than 2.5 days in terms of the way we do it with a half day at a time doesn't provide the continuity that a whole day program would.
Let me ask you this. Now, if it's what's the long-term implications of a situation where kindergarten students would be going 5 days a week full-time? What does that show in terms of the gains to the student and what we may achieve in subsequent years in terms of the number of paraeducators or some of the problems we'd be able to deal with earlier and get a jump on things that might eventually save us money, in other words, on a preventative side?
Well, I can't give you numbers, but I can tell you that we would have the opportunity with the children there longer to do some diagnostic work to see who are the children that are really having difficulties and try to begin to remediate them maybe later in the kindergarten year versus early in their first grade year. The situations that have existed where children go to school a full day, sometimes the services aren't available for that length of time in those classrooms, and you can do some of these things with them when they're there all day. An all-day program, when and just in terms of socialization, which would be a big goal, I shouldn't imply that we're interested in doing a lot of academic programming or increasing that amount for these children. We're still going to do all of our readiness programming and so on, but we'll increase their social activities and be able to do some things with them in terms of their social skills programming that we have, so that they're better prepared for first grade, for example, and can take better advantage of that. We can remediate some of their learning programs earlier and begin to make some progress toward those. I can't tell you that we're going to eliminate a number of aides by the time they're in second grade, but it would seem to me that children would be having more success by then.
And in line with that, what do we do? I have no knowledge of this, so what is it that we are currently doing to try and find out, identifying students even before they come to kindergarten? How many students are in a Head Start program or preschool so that we get some sort of continuity before they hit kindergarten? Is there anything that's in existence that helps work with that?
There are several things. The Head Start program that you're talking about is there for some children. There's an early essential ed program for some children. Those tend to be the children in the most severe need. And those children come to us in kindergarten, and we know who they are, and services have already been put in place, and we pick them up. Children that are new to the district, children whose parents didn't bother to have them screened at 3, 4, or 5-year-olds, or 3 or 4-year-olds for the early essential ed program. Some of those are the kids that we're picking up for the first time in kindergarten. Also, the children who have, I guess I would best put them as modest learning problems that weren't severe enough to be picked up by the early essential ed. We begin to see them in kindergarten, and probably begin to see more of them in first grade because they're expected to do more academic tests.
Now, one more follow-up. Do we have any idea how many students in kindergarten right now leave the school to go to a daycare type situation where somebody might be paying for them to be in continuing school, in a continuing program where somebody's looking after the kids?
We have an idea of some of the numbers of children that we bus to some of those places. We have 100 kindergarten children at Northwest. My guess is that we probably bus 25 of them directly to daycare. And then there are probably others that attend either babysitters or other daycare that I'm particularly not aware of right now because I know of the numbers we put on the buses. So I guess 25 would be a ballpark guess, and maybe Northeast would be about the same.
But we would need to find out some more details about that.
Sure.
And is there a rec program that has anything that would relate to this age group?
In terms of after school or before kindergarten?
Either one.
The rec department has a preschool program for 3 and 4-year-olds over at Rotary Field. It's a program that they are in before they come to kindergarten.
There's not a program for kindergartners during the school day with the rec department.
Not that I'm aware of.
I guess my initial reaction is this kind of a plan looks like we're increasing their time by 1/2 day.
Right.
Okay, that's not, I don't think that's going to tremendously impact the gains or the efforts. But I don't want to be heard as not supporting it. It is clear to me, however, that the concept of moving to full-day kindergarten is a philosophical issue that needs to be sort of looked at, not unlike multi-age, looping, or whatever those other concepts that we in fact do. In fact, full-time kindergarten certainly is an easy way to build additional multi-age programming in a primary school. I certainly support the idea of looking at it. I would struggle as Madeline on a part-time basis because I think that any benefits you might derive are going to quickly be lost with the fact that 2 days they're back at home or having to juggle in terms of parental support and daycare management. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that 25 students out of how many are only going to daycare. I mean, daycare defined as Head Start or those kinds of programs maybe, but babysitters in this day and age is pretty unlikely. And I guess I would like us to explore the concept of full day, but for, I think as Cheryl was alluding to, educational reasons in terms of success by readying kids for school, in addition to
how that is going to support the community need to either reduce or increase daycare type settings. I mean, we need to make a decision philosophically as school systems. Are we going to take this one on? And I also will say, as a kindergarten teacher, a full-day program clearly balances for each kid. Maybe morning isn't his best time, and he gets to kick it in the afternoon. So my assumption is any kind of learning is going to be varied during the week. And certainly, having been there, some kids thrive in the afternoon and are cutting out in the morning. So whatever those issues may be, balance themselves out in a full-day program. It's hard for me to believe that I've come to think that 5-year-olds might want to be in school all day. I think that we need to be tremendously sensitive when we're programming for that age group, though.
And we know that, there is no cut and dry answer. There are good cases of evidence in favor of it and probably some against it. There are personal situations that are in favor of it and against it. I know that there are parents who are home when that child is not in school that other half a day and make very good use of the time they spend with their child when they're not in school for some really good purposes. There are other children who go home and don't have that. So, I mean, I think in trying to look at the whole school population, the best thing would be to have some options. But that's a difficult situation.
One recommendation that I thought was really effective in terms of how we moved into multi-age was choice, and whether we couldn't be looking at possibly making that part-time kindergarten position a full day. And then parents would have the choice as a beginning, and if it was wholeheartedly received or very effective, then you may want to decide in the following year to make that more. But that would be 5 days a week. I couldn't support it on a 3-day a week.
What we haven't taken a look at in that scenario is the children who would be going into first grade, some of whom have had a half-day program and some have had a full-day program. What would that do to try to manage that?
Smarter, that's all.
Yes, I know.
What about the possibility
Parents' choice.
of 1 full day and 4 half days?
There are those possibilities.
That keeps them in school 5 days. If you're a full-time kindergarten teacher, there's 5 sections of kindergarten.
We have to take advantage of the fact that there is one room in the school that's available for half a day. And we are looking at a couple of different kinds of scenarios like that, Madeline, that we want to see how they all would fit together best. We've had kindergarten teachers visiting other programs in the state that have one runs 2 full days and a half day. So it's a 5-session situation just like ours, but instead of running 5 half days, they run 2 full and a half. And there are advantages and disadvantages to all of them. We're going to be meeting with the parents in a week, 2 weeks, to toss out some of these options and to see what their feelings are in terms of what their needs might be. And then we need to try to place it in our physical plan, and if the program is approved, whatever we come up with, develop a program around it. But there's all kinds of things going on just in the state of Vermont with kindergarten. And the problem with most of it is that whoever you talk to probably is going to promote their program. And so are those advantages and disadvantages real, or are they someone's biased opinion? And that's really hard to determine.
Well, when I tried to research it, I tried to do it through Eric, and I tried to do it online. And perhaps I'm not using the right word to get the information, but I'm having trouble finding. I'm looking for non-biased literature, not by teachers presenting their own programs. And so if you have anything like that, or could lead me in a direction, I can't do much well, but I can do research. And
I have one for sure that I can pass
I'd
out
like
here.
to see it.
Was there any mention in the Instruction and Learning Council presentation, or actually the work that Lorraine did in terms of developing the scenarios for the reorganization, which ultimately came out to be a little differently than what we ended up doing? But in any case, was there any information at that point that you folks came across in your research on full-day kindergartens?
that you recall as it tied into? And is CAP working on this? Or looking at this at all? Is this something that they would be looking at? in terms of-
more on our plate. Well, just sort of a slightly different subject that opens up a possibility. Has there been any more thought or any more discussion about any special program that we had talked about possibly running in Northeast? Southeast?
Yes. I don't have the final plans or recommendations for you tonight, but I have it under my superintendent's report later to comment on. We've had some continued dialogue with a group of teachers and staff on that bill. We had teams from each one of our buildings at a state planning session last week, looking at different kinds of options like that. And we are still in discussion with BAC on the kind of program they're running and offering and trying to retool their offering for us. The fact of the matter is we entered into another conversation with another agency about 2 weeks ago called Smoky House. That's another possible organization. And they're due back, I think, to us next week with a proposal that they might be able to offer. We've got a variety of things that we're looking at. We're still aiming to try to do something with that special population of students known as EBD children.
If we did anything like that at Southeast, does that provide us with anything that we ought to be considering in the discussion for our kindergarten possibilities?
In terms of freeing up space somewhere,
Yeah.
30 to 40 children we'll be talking about, Bill, would come from grade 7 through 12. And would not free up any particular room. There'd be spaces all over in different classes. And even though we have the same kinds of needs in some of our lower grades, it'd be the same story. If we wanted to ever entertain doing something with that building, then we'd have to look for other solutions for this population we're talking about, in school solutions.
Yeah, I just feel a little bit uncomfortable about the suggestion that the purpose for the extended kindergarten is more for needing additional time to focus on socialization skills as opposed to academics. Well, I understand that academics and kindergarten sound a little harsh together, but by the same token, the CAP committee has certainly identified problems even at very young ages about the need to focus additional time and energies on reading and language. And for that reason, along with the fact that over the past several years, we probably have had more programs that intervene in an attempt to bring about better socialization skills. And those programs would be programs like a Head Start or a Triple E program. And at the same time that we do have those programs, I know that for myself as a board member, I've heard each and every year, in the fall certainly, about the problems that we have with the number of kids entering our schools that are not ready to learn. And it just causes me to say, well, all right, our socialization programs aren't doing what we need to have done. Then what next will we try? And I would have a difficult time pumping more money into socialization until we can hear some sort of rationale or plan that would suggest that whatever it is that we've been trying is maybe not solely what we're going to be relying on in an improved program.
We would bring a proposal to you that would outline the program before we would ask you to make a decision on it for sure. Once we decided on the format, we would certainly bring you something that what their day or what their week would look like and how it's different from now and why we think that that's good, and ask you to make a decision based on that, and not just more time.
Well, let's move along and look at some other numbers. I don't want to prolong this too much on just the primary portion, but I do want to explain some other things. We'll be back to some of this discussion again in the future, I know. I'm going to put another, let me also pass out something else. This is a good time to do it. Up here. If you remember 2 weeks ago, there was a discussion around the table of getting some more comparable data. So what I'm passing out to you now are these budget sheets that you're familiar with, which represent the current and the actual budget for this school year right now. So you want to mark that somehow up at the top, whatever means something clear to you. So that with this document now, you have 96 data, 96 operating budget. You also have in tiny figures underneath the bottom, heavy black type figures throughout the pages, the fiscal year 95 figure.
Is that 94, 95?
94, 95. And then of course the current document we gave you 2 weeks ago for next week is fiscal year 97. So you're spanning 3 years worth of data here. Now, I also want to explain to you that when you get into the special education portions of this budget I just gave you, you begin to lose the potential to compare oranges to oranges, or comparing the actual operating budget this year to the next year's projected budget, because that's where those figures begin to break down, as the business office goes into a very sophisticated tracking system to recover costs. But in all other ways, this will give you comparable data. And we can always come back and try to provide answers on the special education piece. What I wanted to do is spend just a few minutes on, this is the same page that you got 2 weeks ago, the first page of your handout 2 weeks ago. I just want to go through some of the numbers as they pertain to the Northeast School and Northwest School. Yes. By the way, everyone was invited to come here tonight from the school. That's simplification week. I don't know that everyone will come anyway, but they can sit home and watch the show on TV. Sometimes you folks find out about that when you interact with people later in the week. I know I do. These big figures on the Northeast School with salaries and substitutes, these figures, if you bounce down here where it says support services, special education, support staff, salaries, support staff salaries, those are the line items that pay for all the personnel we just showed you on the other two overheads. You know, the 13 teachers or the 12, the 13 teachers or the 13 teachers, plus a portion of the special ed here and here. But those are the numbers that pay for all those personnel. The support staff, $5,000 apiece, pays for the cafeteria and the noon lunchtime workers in these two buildings. Supplies, techs, and equipment represents the list that both schools turned into this office. Everything that they submitted is included here. The difference why this was higher than Northeast schools is what John included in his list, a series of computers for his building. This item pays for the copying expense for each school building. Library aid. Is there any other question I might answer for you along those two columns? Let me go to the second page. Yes. Question?
Well, that district-wide librarian, that's not just the primary school, that's the current position.
That's right.
So there's no
That's the person,
recommendation.
that's the person that's over the intermediate school building. I did speak to it, but yes, that's the person. Yes.
Under the salaries and substitutes line, under instruction,
Yes.
can you give us some idea how much of that is actually substitutes and how much is salary?
You're talking about the figure that's over here, on the district line.
I'm not actually talking about any of them.
Okay.
Along intermediate school, northeast school, northwest school.
Let me switch back for you. This page. The district elementary substitute money is located in here. It's
Oh, okay.
$35,000. Covers small buildings.
What did you say the amount was?
$35,000.
Okay, that's the substitutes for,
These schools.
okay. And then the district-wide,
Or
obviously there's a whole lot of other stuff in
two
there
art
as well.
teachers, 3 physical education teachers, and then 2 music teachers.
Oh. Okay. Okay. So part of what we saw in that first sheet is over there as well?
That's correct.
Okay.
Right. Second page, technically, it's all administration, plant operations, salary of the principal in each case. We have some extra money in there for the remainder of the incentive money that we owe to the former principal. This pays for the secretary in each building, some expenses for the offices, and down here for the custodian and operational expenses of the 2 buildings. This is the one we always note every year. This is higher because of the electric power in the Northeast School versus the hot water system over here.
How come the principal's salary is so much higher in Northeast School?
This is where we have some money that we still owe the former principal as part of the incentive program for retirement.
In their contract, if they retire after X number of years of service, they get a principal of money and their benefits are covered.
You're talking about Ms. Van?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
That salary figure doesn't reflect benefits as well.
No, it does not.
Only that particular benefit is reflected.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, I won't go through each of these details here, unless you want me to, but these, as I said, the operational supply, repair, telephone costs of each building. That was the extent of what I was going to do tonight in terms of the primary schools. And John talking about the kindergarten and new approach that they were talking about. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with more details, and next time we'll be focusing chiefly on the intermediate school and on some special education schools.
I just have one comment.
Yeah.
I just sort of need to revisit this kindergarten piece.
Okay.
You're certainly speaking to my passion, one of my many. How far along in this process are we, in terms of if we're having parent meetings, information meetings, et cetera? Is that what I heard we are doing? I mean, it's out there in
To
the...
get feedback.
To get feedback.
Feedback. We are in no way, there's no any decision made to run this program yet next year. Let me make that clear. I told John that, I told you that.
Do you
It depends
anticipate-
upon the budget, what we can afford.
At what point do you anticipate bringing the budgetary figures that would look at that program decision?
Probably by April, we'd have a lot more clarity and know whether or not what we can do.
Well, if that was the case, I guess my need would be that you would certainly explore the educational rationale and the budgetary implications of 5 full-day programs, or a 5 full-day program. And needless to say, it's probably impossible, but nonetheless.
Unless we want to make major building changes, that's a problem.
Well,
I think that would be.
I see this one is pretty impossible, too. For different reasons.
That would be a big part of your feedback, right there. Straight up question you should be asking is whether parents would support anything less than that. Went to
Less than the 5
5 days. Because I know I can't speak like Madeline, being a mother.
Oh, you're a father.
But I have heard from many of them, you know, in terms of how we give the updates, out and half days and so on and out.
bends their schedule to one of our dinners and so on.
You know, I don't really care about the budget, no. I really care about the education. And I know there have been people out in the community trying to get information in the library, trying to research this, and they're coming up against a brick wall too. So I really...
We have it under lock and key.
Well, it must be. I want to reiterate the need to disseminate that information before a board meeting so we have an opportunity to digest it.
I also want to hear what you hear from the parents, because I myself have already heard from a couple, and I want to compare notes with them.
And we did have two of those parents here tonight. I know Maureen, and the other mother was here 2 weeks ago. I don't remember your name. Lauren. Welcome. All right. Thank you, John.
You can come back.
We'll be back. The next two pieces of this part of the meeting are David Walks.
We're going to talk about the recent activities of the CAP committee and the 3 CAP subcommittees. And so this doesn't sound too much like jargon for first-time viewers. The CAP committee stands for Curriculum Assessment Professional Development. And it's a committee with 3 subcommittees based upon the fields of knowledge as identified as a way to organize curriculum. In terms of history and social sciences, math, science, technology, and arts, language, literature. And the board has empowered the CAP committees to meet and to work on developing a K-12 curriculum in all the areas that I mentioned as well as in others, and how those areas are integrated, and also to look at the ways in which we measure success, and also to look at professional development, which actually reflects the needs of our curriculum and assessment. So, having said that, I wanted to bring the board up to date, because I think it's been about 6 weeks since we had our last informational session on the CAP committees. They've been meeting regularly. You've been well represented by Ted Lindgren and Madeline Sherman, who have attended all the meetings. And Madeline also serves on the steering committee, which meets the week before the regular CAP committee meetings. CAP committee meetings are always the first Tuesday of the month in the evening. We alternate between 5 to 7:30 at the Stafford Tech Center 1 month, and then 7 to 9:30 right here the next month. At our last meeting, we had a very spirited discussion, having heard in previous meetings some theory and research on curriculum development. We looked at, as a group, and there are 19 members on the CAP committee representing students, teachers, parents, administrators, representatives of the business community, human services, board members, as I mentioned. So it's a very representative group. And at that meeting, we looked at how we want the curriculum to look, what is the best way to attack this endeavor, and also to look at the ways in which we want to organize both the curriculum and the measures of success in curriculum. And after lots of discussion over the last 2 meetings, it was actually decided unanimously that the way in which we would divide the curriculum would be K-3, 4-7, and 8-12. Now, that might sound strange given that our buildings are organized K2, 3-6, 7-8, and 9-12. But the theory here, and everyone seems to have thought into this theory, is that in an effort to bridge the normal gaps between buildings, that it would make sense for us to establish exit criteria based upon curriculum expectations at the K-3 level, narrowing that gap between schools, that is Northeast, Northwest, and the intermediate school. 4-7, eliminating the gap between, actually a catwalk right now, between 6 and 7. And also 8 and 9, integrating the work of the middle school and the high school. And it makes a lot of sense. So we've decided to proceed with those
ways in which we organize curriculum development. Now, we all believe, and I think the research shows and practice indicates in those districts that have taken this seriously, that we really need to place more value in the high school diploma. That is not as an accumulation of seat time and an accumulation of credits, even though we do require more credits for graduation than any other Vermont high school, and that's quite apart from the jam plan requirement, but to measure that success and to lend some credence to the value of a high school diploma. So we've looked at the so-called Common Core, which is the result of work of Vermonters in a number of those areas that I mentioned before, and other sources of information, including standards in those areas. And we agreed that given the work of the three subcommittees, which include 20 to 23 people in each one of the three subcommittees, that we would look at graduation expectations. That is, what it is students should know and be able to do when they leave our system. What are the sort of exit criteria? What are the standards that we should have in all of those academic areas? And then take recommendations from those committees and divide those, sort of working backwards, to divide the skill acquisition by age-appropriate time. And so when you look at the K-3 configuration that I mentioned before, by grade 3, there would be a certain level of standards that students should have achieved before they go on to grade 4. Now that begs the question of how you enforce it, and particularly given research on retention. And the CAP committee, like others who have struggled with that, are still struggling. But nevertheless, there has been consensus, strong consensus, on the way we divide that task and on the need for establishing graduation standards. And we were blessed by the representation by each of the three subcommittees at the CAP meeting last time, so the chair and vice chair, or co-chairs, were all at the meeting, so we're all sort of on the same page. Those are the two major areas. I'm going to distribute to you the agendas and meeting notes from our last two meetings. At our next meeting, you'll see from the agenda that I distribute, the CAP committee is going to go through a similar kind of process that this group went through a week ago in terms of looking at the district's mission and the belief statements, etc. I also want to distribute to you a list in draft form now, which is inclusive but not an exhaustive list at this point, of the summer professional development opportunities that we have put together thus far. Now, this is related to the work of the CAP committee because professional development, as you know, needs to be tied to the work, to the curriculum and assessment work that we do. But we are members of a group called the Collaborative, and the Collaborative is composed of 6 supervisory unions in Rutland County. And the Collaborative is part of the Rutland Region Alliance. And you've heard about the Alliance, the public has heard about the Alliance. It's a wonderful and unique partnership among business, higher education, K-12 education, human services. Now, the group that we belong to, and I'm vice chair of the Alliance, and Dr. Brothers is a member of the Alliance, the group that we belong to, the Collaborative, has put together many of these opportunities. The first one is the Middle School Technology Institute, which we plan to run here, modeled very much after the High School Technology Institute that we ran last summer. And that is helping teachers to better utilize the new computer hardware and software that's been acquired for the middle school. And as you can see, there are a number of other professional development opportunities. This list will be added to, but as you can see, from June 17 through August 16, there's a lot happening for teachers. Now, much of this work is actually going to be subsidized by grants which we have secured, including grants from ISMIT, Vermont Institute of Science, Math, and Technology, and other sources. You can see there's something for everyone here. The last one is a particularly interesting one that we are also going to host, and that's August 12 to 16, where Rutland Intermediate School will be hosting the Responsive Classroom Summer Institute, which is taught by the Northeast Foundation for Children. The teachers at that school received, I think, very well received a presentation, a workshop on the responsive classroom, improving social skills for young people. And we're opening up that training to teachers in Rutland County. And we'll have 125 teachers at that session. Now, I wanted to, and I will pass out here the agendas and minutes from the last, let's take forward. Switching gears a little bit here.
Before you switch gears,
Yes.
David, I have a question about your professional development schedule here.
Yeah.
And items. Is it, before I wait till the end?
No, this is a good time.
Okay. These topics, courses that have been identified here, have they been identified by the CAP committee or has this been identified by the collaborative?
The answer is both.
Okay.
Okay. The collaborative really initiated the education of the gifted and talented, the everyday math training, the DASH, Developmental Approaches to Science and Health Institute, and the CORD Applied Academics Training. The Responsive Classroom Summer Institute actually emanated from both the interest of the leadership at our intermediate school and also interest from other schools in the collaborative. Now, a couple of these actually emanated from Castleton, like the Age of Lincoln, but it was based upon some success that they had last summer. So the answer is both.
Okay. In our teacher's contract, there's a clause about reimbursement for course studies.
Yep.
Professional development. And I guess what I need to know is there some tie-in between those course studies that this district might approve for a teacher and what this district expects from a teacher within the classroom? I mean, or we aren't sending anybody out and paying the tuition credits for someone to learn basket weaving or anything like that.
No, you would never hear that from us.
But is it happening? Okay. But basket weaving certainly is an extreme.
Yes, it is.
But would there be some other courses that might not necessarily be of value to our classrooms that teachers might be allowed to take?
We pass judgment on all professional development opportunities. Yeah. And there's a local standards board that also passes judgment on the credits that are allowed for professionals, and it's part of what's called an individual professional development plan. And that gets approved by the local standards board, so there is some quality control at that level and also at our level in approving courses. There's a direct relationship between what teachers learn and application in the classroom.
We don't restrict, for example, if teachers wanted to take courses in administration, they could do that.
Yes, they could.
Yes.
Okay, anything else on CAP? To talk about grants, I was asked actually in January, I think, to provide for you an update on how we're doing with grants this year. And I've already reported that we received the Goals 2000 grant to support both the CAP Committee's strategic planning and overall curriculum and assessment improvements. We've already spent some of the money to purchase curriculum materials and to look at some of the national standards, the high expectations in different academic areas to help us with what I mentioned before in terms of setting those graduation standards. We also mentioned, or I think Dr. Brothers mentioned at a meeting a couple of months ago, that we applied for and received from the alcohol and drug abuse programs in Montpelier funding for a student assistance program at Rutland Middle School. And that is to hire someone to work part-time, totally paid for through the grant, to assist students who are engaging in risk behaviors and to work with the staff. And we are close to hiring that person. We received the grant, and that funding goes for another year. And that provides some help for us at the middle school at no cost to us. We also, just as a reminder, this is a grant that Dale Smith worked on last year and is administering this year at the high school, a Learn and Serve grant. That's a total for the 3 years, and we are now in year 1. We also applied for and received $10,000 from the Children's Trust Fund, which is to fund our multimedia peer prevention education program, which ran during Jan Plan and has provided some funding for the school. And we did, this is the approximate value of the new TVs and 50 TVs and 15 VCRs for the high school. We have a couple of grants pending right now. We've applied again to the Children's Trust Fund. And it's questionable whether they would fund the school in the second year because not many schools actually are recipients of Children's Trust Fund money. But we came up with what we thought was sort of a creative approach, again in response to the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, to help provide some funding for support groups and to develop some helping peer programs within the school system with high school kids helping younger kids. And we hope that that will be funded. It may be kind of a long shot though. We also applied for the Vermont Business Roundtable Medallion Award. It's not really a grant, but every year the Vermont Business Roundtable awards one school in the state for special achievement. And we applied a couple of weeks ago, and if we were to receive that award, and again there are lots of schools that apply, but if we were to receive it, we would also receive $5,000. And the application was around the whole Jan Plan program and the curriculum changes at the high school. Now, a big one that we're involved with now and that I've started writing is a community partnership grant through Safe and Drug-Free Schools allocation. This year, they cut off the top a certain percentage of the Safe and Drug-Free School money. We get about 40-something thousand in the district. We got more last year and more the year before. And that's not just because of congressional budget cuts, but it's also because they took some of the money off and provided for 6 sort of incentive grants. And 6 school districts in Vermont will be awarded this grant. And the purpose of it is to address youth risk behaviors, but to do it in a melded way with your community. Now, given that a lot has happened in this community with the Mayor's Safety Net program and our internal reaction to this and the programs that we've developed in the school, and also because we have a very good relationship with the community agencies, the hospital, and the mayor's group, and because there's a lot of collaboration here, we think that we're pretty well poised for that. It's a big, thick grant application. It'll be worth it. We'll probably apply for more than that amount, but what's particularly interesting about this is that it really is a partnership, and our purpose here is to provide some subsidized funding for teacher training, particularly in the social skills training to help subsidize the responsive classroom program that I mentioned before, in conflict resolution, looking at gang prevention curriculum, and not just for teachers, but for community folks who are interested in this. But the major part of the grant, if funded, and probably 80 to 90% of the grant funds would be used to develop a new youth center in Rutland. It would be housed at the Dana Recreation Center, and the vision for this youth center would be not just to focus on recreational activities, but to provide for kids a real information referral and support service, some job counseling by having the Department of Employment and Training actually working there as well, by providing some classes in healthy living, and by providing community service opportunities for kids. It also would include the reinvigoration of the RAMP program. You're familiar with the RAMP program? It's a sort of a volunteer community mentoring program, like a Big Brother, Big Sister type program. And our vision is to actually have this mentoring program housed at this new youth center, and to integrate those activities with mentors and volunteers working alongside area young people. And we would also provide, not only providing recreation activities for at-risk youth during the school year, but there'd be after-school programs, including intramural sports, and there'd be some special summer programs, including the use of our Project Adventure facilities with trained instructors at the high school to actually open up that facility to more kids and at a younger age. So the Community Partnership Grant really could pay big dividends for us. It's a school program in that only schools can apply for this money, but it's our goal to really forge that partnership with City Hall and with all of the different agencies that are doing the same thing that we're trying to do, and that is to help kids at as early an age as possible. Any questions about any of the grants that we've received or that I've applied for or will apply for? Carol? We've received 20 or 30, have installed 6, I believe, and the rest will be installed. They're being used, but not installed in the class. The rest will be installed this summer. Yeah. Anything about any of the others?
I just want to say that that last endeavor was fantastic. And I think that if we get it, it's going to be a great asset to the community. It's very much needed.
Well, we've extended our hand to City Hall and to all the other agencies to try and work together.
Thanks, Dave. Bob, could you put this down, please?
Superintendent's report.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Rutland.
There's 4 items under my report that I would just like to talk about. And EBD, actually, I did discuss it already when Bill asked me about that earlier. I don't know if it's necessary to go over that anymore. We are still planning. We're looking at the end of March as our target date for having something that we can report back to this board that will help us deal with those youngsters next year in a better way than we're dealing with them now. It does involve one way or the other in using the Southeast School at the present time. So we'll be back with that one. Number 2, school report card. Last Thursday morning, possibly in the Herald, you saw an article on the front page which was reporting the new school report card. Actually, it was last year they started the process. Not too successful in a way. This was the second year to get it up off the ground. It's certainly a very good effort, and I'd like to point made in the Sunday editorial in the Herald that it's probably a real good function for the State Department of Education to be providing quality data about all the school districts in the state, so you can make some good comparisons between them. And that's what they're about. They actually expanded the reporting system. They have a lot more data they reported, and if you wanted it all, you could dump it off the internet, because that's actually where we got all our pages of information from. There's still some mistakes in parts of it, but basically it's good data. I have it signed in the office.
Actually, it was in the Herald last week. That's how we know about it. We read it in the Herald, and then we downloaded it off the internet.
Third item, it's been in the news since I mailed this out to you. Richard Cate, who has been for maybe 5 years the Executive Secretary of the Vermont Superintendent Organization, is leaving for a job in the New York State Department of Education. Actually, he's going to be the Chief Financial Officer for the State Department of Education in New York. It's a nice big jump, increase in responsibilities and salaries for Dick. It's a big loss for Vermont, because he is one of the more credible people in terms of data and just support for kids in public schools around the state of Vermont. And you could always bank on an answer. If you called Dick Cate and got an answer from him, whether it be a money answer or an opinion on some new regulation, you can always bank on it being pretty much a straight shooter and very, very accurate. So he's a big loss for us, but I can't blame him for taking the job because it must be, well, it's a huge assignment given the size of the state of New York. The job he will hold is similar to the job Jerry Casales has in the State Department here of Education, but just a lot more zeros after the numbers that he deals with over there. Finally, amendment to the estimate contract. I included in your packet the amendment to the contract that had been worked out between the management of the school district and ASME personnel dealing with holidays. And it's really all ready to really just approve, and maybe Bill could speak to that, and ratify, authorize the superintendent to sign it.
Why don't we have a motion and a second, and then answer any questions or hear any comments?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments regarding the amendment that Bill addressed to the board last week?
I have a question about it. If I look at that calendar that you passed out last week, if that calendar, 2 weeks ago, if that calendar were to go into effect, January 1st would be a holiday, and the next 2 days would be in-service days.
Yes,
Would that
way.
impact on this at all?
No.
Because school would be closed on January 1st, and so.
It wouldn't impact on this at all. Actually, this whole arrangement is set up to improve the situation in terms of how their holidays are calculated.
Cheryl?
Wasn't it a Veterans Day a few years ago that we got hit with having the school in session and the AFSCME unit ended up having to work and received triple time for that?
Some of the members did. That was the day in which we did an in-service that day because the speaker was available. I think that was Roger Taylor. It was October that we brought him in. So we had to have some of the men aboard in operating buildings, and those people had to be paid at that rate. This would solve and address almost all those issues. I think if it's where Veterans Day is still listed as a holiday, we'd have to, obviously, we'd have to step around that and try not to use that day.
The way it's set up, Veterans is in the sort of floating holidays.
Okay.
That is one that might get moved, and what it says is that instead of having the triple time situation, all it is you give them an additional floating holiday. So it's just a day for a day. And they get to choose it, and there are restrictions on how it can be done.
Oh, okay.
So the arrangement now is to eliminate that particular situation so that we didn't have that conflict, and it was simply a day for a day, and the union has approved this and gone along with it. I mean, this is to get rid of those kinds of situations. We had the same thing with the day before Christmas.
And that would also then, if we decided to observe the state holidays and Memorial Day, that would give you that flexibility.
That's correct.
So the motion is to amend the contract and to authorize the superintendent to sign on behalf of the district. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Financial matters, Bob.
Thank you. We have two agenda items under financial matters tonight. The first being the monthly receipts and expense update for January. On the receipt side, January is typically a slow month. Most of our revenue is made up of tax transfers, of which $450,000 was transferred during the month of January. During the month of February, you'll start to see a greater cash flow. Taxes were collected, so we should be seeing more in the terms of tax transfers. We also will start seeing some vocational grant revenue. March 1st, we'll get our balance of state aid of $965,000. We've also just sent in our reimbursement for special ed funding. And if you look at our receipts ledger under extraordinary, you'll see that we have a $600,000 budgeted item. We've only received $10,000 to date. That's due because we have to expend up to a certain portion for dollars per student before we start receiving the 90% reimbursement, so we have now reached a threshold for most of those kids. So we'll start seeing some of that money in March. We're also going to be sending out the second semester Stafford tuition bills on March 15th, and probably next week, the third quarter on high school tuition bills. So our revenue will start to pick up. To date, we received about 40% of our revenue after 7 months of operations. On the expenditure side, I don't have too much new to report. Expenditures are pretty much on target to what we expected through the month of January. During the next few months, we will be monitoring some accounts to see how we're doing, especially in electricity and oil. We've had a rather cold winter, so we'll see how our oil and electric accounts come out. And we'll also start to make some adjusting journal entries to expend some of the state and federal grants that typically we do at this time of the year. Other than that, I have nothing else, unless you have questions concerning our expenditures and receipts. Okay. Going along with your monthly update, we have a monthly contingency update. The last balance you saw on your December statement was $74,504. We made 3 adjustments during the month of January, which we talked about at the last update, showing you a current balance of $33,549. I do have some items to report that are pending due to the Act 250 requirements at the high school, and also due to the new contract we have with the Rutland County Sheriffs. Our traffic control cost at the Rutland High School will be $10,000 over what we budgeted.
And that's because we had to switch from the city police department to the sheriff's department.
That's correct.
$10,000 more to do that.
Yes.
Even though there were times when the city police were doing things outside the city. That's true.
I don't know. I do know that, well, I'll let you address that rather than get into that. Would you care to?
Do we have any
I
other
don't know
options?
what the contracts were with the Rutland Police Department, Manuel. I can't really speak to that. All I know is that there was a lot of increased difficulty, and they're trying to meet this need of ours. And I spoke to the chief on several different occasions, many occasions, and we finally were getting some heat from the Act 250 Commission itself. And I had to, at some point, sign an affidavit, which is just a step up, a major step up from a letter. I have it not notarized, or I don't know, had it witnessed in some way, had to swear my little life away that there'd be the trained officers at both locations, the intersection and at the driveway.
Are we going to try and work with the police department next year to try and save the taxpayers that money?
I will certainly continue our contacts and communications with the police department.
The problem was we had scheduled coverage and it did not show.
I think that we ought to be talking with the Act 250 people, because I think the requirements, I think, are excessive. And I think these kinds of requirements that cost the taxpayers money, that don't accomplish anything significant, ought to be challenged. I think it's most unfortunate that this is as a result of that board.
Do you feel that elimination of the traffic officer at that hour, forgetting about Act 250 requirements, would be in our best interest or not?
I think the one at the driveway itself is absolutely needed during the morning hour.
At the driveway.
The one at the corner is not. It's been my conversation inside this building with other personnel that once we got by this year, that it might be appropriate to move forward and appeal that position, that part of the requirement next year. But I wanted to at least get hold of formal approval from the board that our afternoon requirement was waived. And we haven't received that yet, and I'm waiting for that document to arrive.
do we gain anything by putting this out to a bid? I mean, are there maybe other towns around here that would, for the sake of cash flow, take up something like that?
About private security.
Private security folks didn't meet the requirements of the Act 250 permit trucks.
What about these people who direct traffic in their little orange vests when they're doing road work? Those are trained security, trained in traffic control?
Not all the time, but there were many times this past fall where they were Rutland City police officers.
The walkie-talkie, the stop-go lady with the walkie-talkie. I don't think she's highly trained, no. Sorry.
They would not meet the criteria that I expected.
But they can control traffic on the intersection of 74.
Of course.
There's something wrong.
They don't control that traffic on the route, on Woodstock
Well, when
Avenue.
they're
Somebody just stands
doing-
there on the corner, don't they?
When they're doing construction, they do.
Yeah, we're talking about two different things. That's why I said I don't believe that's necessary.
One thing to note, since the sheriff's department has been hired, the coverage has been consistent and timely.
I just have to say that I'm a titch embarrassed as a school commissioner to recognize the fact that no one in this city really cares where I drop any other age group off. I mean, I could drop my kindergarten off and he'd have to walk 6 blocks and no one cares. It's phenomenal to me that I'm not allowed to drop my 15-year off 3 blocks away from the school to have him walk because there's some 250 restriction that he has to be brought to the driveway, then I have to turn around, drop him off, open his door, walk him into his locker or whatever. I mean, it's insane. So I just think I would look at
You
those
can drop them
options.
off wherever you want.
Drop them off wherever you want. Act 250 can't say that you have to drive your car into the yard.
Well, that's not the best advice I'm giving. Has behavior not been too
Well, we all know what comes home from the kids.
I'd like to ask Bob to continue
I would go for it.
before then.
Sorry about that.
All right, after the traffic, we have an additional increase in Stafford Technical Director's Guidance and Co-op salary reimbursement of $2,100. And as Dr. Butler alluded to earlier, Stafford Technical tuition that we pay Stafford Technical, we had budgeted 90 students this year to go to Stafford Technical. The first semester we had 67. It looks like we're going to have approximately 63 for the second semester, so that will be a savings in our budget of $70,000 for this year.
Except that the Stafford Technical Center has a budget, and if we send less students, that means everybody's got to pay more.
That's correct. The bookkeeping determines that for the close of the year, yes.
So there's a possibility of this $70,000 that sometime after July 1st, we're going to get hit for a bill for...
We'll be monitoring that as we, what our expenditures are.
That bill would be distributed around all schools.
Well, I realize that, but this tells me that we're sending $70,000 less into the pot than the Stafford Technical anticipated.
That's correct.
Which means that $70,000 is going to come out of somewhere. Part of it our high.
Unless it's made up by tuitions from other schools. Because
Okay, right.
Is there a reason why we're a third under what we projected? I mean, is our high school doing a better job and there are more kids that are staying there and the program is different? Or because they're sharing courses, it's working out better? I mean, what's the reason for the drop?
I don't know, Bill, and that's something we have to investigate. I just found out about this past week.
Expansion of the AEP program.
I would also be interested in knowing what the difference is in the enrollment in the morning program as opposed to the afternoon program. Because it might be that our early dismissal time at the high school has discouraged our students from signing up for any afternoon program. And that could be where some of the shortfall comes from.
We'll do some research on this because it's a question that needs some answers.
So, using that $70,000 as a projected surplus, we would be looking at this point at a fund balance of $95,715, barring any other unforeseen expenditures. As I said, we continue to monitor special education, and that's something that You can't predict who's going to move in or move out. But here's where we're at. That's all I have.
Thank you. Is there any new business to come before the board? Madeline?
Something. I mentioned this to David, and Bob, speaking about the contingency fund, reminds me of this. I would like to see us give some kind of a stipend, however small, to the teachers that are serving on the CAP committee. It's a tremendous time commitment, and I think other districts do this, whether they do it out of their Goals 2000 grants or budgeted funds or whatever. But I think it's something that's worth considering. We don't seem to show appreciation that way, and I'm not talking about thousands of dollars here. I'm talking $50 or $100, something to say thank you for the time commitment that you're putting in. Administrators get paid differently, and their time commitment is different, and we expect it's different. So I just think it's something worth considering.
We would do so.
Might be within the grant fund. So other districts that are doing it are doing it out of their reorganization grant funds.
Can I get some of that too?
No, you can't, and neither can I.
Any other new business?
Yeah, I just had a question regarding buses, not the bus, school buses. Are these buses equipped with seatbelts?
Yes.
And who monitors the use of those seatbelts?
Nobody does.
Because I don't think those seatbelts are being used.
We don't require the youngsters to wear them. We encourage them to wear them, but we don't monitor it or try to enforce it in any way.
Why are they with the seatbelts?
Why?
If they're not going to.
Because you can't buy the buses without them anymore. There's also research from the National Institute that studies this, that at least on board school buses, that the use of seatbelts where they are monitored and where they are enforced hasn't resulted in any safer transportation schemes yet. So I'm not to say that that's not a good idea. It's certainly worthwhile, and I would encourage my children to use them. In fact, we use them personally all the time in our cars, even going down the street for a bottle of milk, because research also shows that most major accidents that people have are usually within a half mile or so of your place of residence or your place of work.
Well, I'm just concerned because I know those seatbelts are not being used system-wide, and as a parent and a school board member, I'm just wondering about the safety of the students. And if we have a seatbelt, what are we doing to encourage that use besides paying lip service? I mean, at the beginning of each school year, are students go through some sort of training on school bus use and are told to use the seatbelts? And I'm just wondering.
Yes, there is that type of orientation that we go through one time at the beginning of the year.
And as the school bus driver is saying, as the students get on, buckle your seatbelt. I mean, these are things I don't know.
That I don't know about, Ted. I know that it's a difficult job, and I know that we're not alone in that respect in trying to enforce the use of them. It is just an overwhelming burden to try to get all the youngsters to buckle up before the bus would ever leave. And so we simply are not following the practice of trying to enforce it. But we do encourage it, and the youngsters are talked to about it. We do buckle them up where they have the aids on the buses with the handicapped youngsters.
And just one more question, how does that fit into Vermont's mandatory seatbelt law?
That one I don't know, Ted, and I'll have to find an answer for you.
Any other new business to come before the board? If not, is there any old business to come before the board? Policy, Cheryl?
But the policy committee met last week, February 21st, and I have distributed copies of the minutes to each and every one of you. And in that meeting, we decided to bring back policy 6180, which is the employee assistance program, with some minor changes made in it, as had been recommended by this board at a meeting in December. So I would move that this board accept the employee assistance program policy, number 6180, as recommended by the policy committee for first reading.
Is there any discussion of the motion?
Cheryl, maybe just explain that one
Yeah,
sentence.
yeah, the change that was made is the second paragraph, the last sentence. Such assistance will be provided by the employee's health insurance coverage or at the employee's expense. There was a question in December as to whether or not it was clear enough that this was not provided at district expense, but at employee expense. And certainly the employees have the opportunity to access whatever health insurance coverage that they have before they need to begin picking up the cost. But we feel that this language is much clearer than the way we had presented it in December.
Comment or questions? If not, all in favor of the motion to approve the first reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It will be presented for a second meeting at the next regular meeting of the board.
I have a question on the minutes. Do you mean to say that the policy committee is not going to meet again until May?
Right. There's a problem with getting the group together during tax season, as well as one of the major items on our agenda is Athletic and Activities Council, and they had also expressed some frustration at scheduling. So we decided to postpone it towards later in the year. We didn't really see that there was an urgent need to address that issue any earlier than that. The minutes do reflect the discussions that we had relative to the Athletic Council policy. And also, towards the end of our meeting, we did have some discussions about the need to update the graduation requirements policy so it reflects what is written in the course description booklet at the high school. And we also had talked about developing a new policy for acceptable use on the internet, which seems to be a growing concern in school districts. So that's it.
I would just express concern on that Activities and Athletic Council, that who's representing the activities now?
No, but they never have.
It's an athletic council now, not an athletic and activities council.
There's never been
I'm
anybody
sorry,
there representing
maybe
the
I didn't
activities.
understand what your question was.
I don't know that it's that critical to go back in history, but I don't think it was the intent of the board for it to become strictly an athletic council.
I think it was, originally, when Jack was there, it was to serve as somebody to help Jack with all those decisions. So it was my understanding that it was just athletics.
Strictly athletics.
And we had talked along the way about switching it over to activities, but we never made that move.
Thank you.
Did you?
That was, I'm assuming, the discussion what that committee's looking at.
Yes, we did start to talk about the idea of incorporating activities and athletics within one council. That was pretty much the direction that the board had given us. And so we went in with that idea that that was indeed what we were going to accomplish. But then as people began expressing concerns, and it wasn't simply the athletic council members that were expressing concerns, it also was concerns from the fine arts department and those people who might represent the activities portion. The fact that there is difficulty in getting to all the issues that they need to cover at this time. And if the role of that council was expanded, there seemed to be a concern about whether the discussions would necessarily be relative to everyone there, and would that be the best use of everyone's time. So I think that the feeling that came out of that meeting was that we needed to have an activities council and an athletic council that would still exchange information, but maybe a decision was made as to which information was really relevant to both committees, and that there would be times when the committees would meet together as well as times that they would meet separately.
Thank you. Is there anything else to come before the board in open session? If not, the chair would entertain a motion that the board go into executive session for the purposes of discussing personnel and contractual matters. The premature release of information regarding those subjects would place this board at a substantial disadvantage in the opinion of the board chair.
I'll move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?